The motion sensor chimed at 3:17 p.m. on a scorching Tuesday afternoon. Michael Torres, 42, a trauma surgeon who'd just collapsed into bed after a brutal 14-hour shift, heard the distinctive splash through his bedroom window. Then another. Then shrieking laughter that pierced through his exhaustion like a scalpel. He stumbled to the window and looked down at his backyard. 3 kids, none older than 13, were cannonballing into his pool. Again. This was the 7th time in 3 weeks. 7 times he'd found wet footprints, discarded juice boxes, and complete disregard for the 6-foot privacy fence he'd installed specifically to avoid this. 7 times he'd tried reasoning, calling parents, even pleading with the HOA. But today was different. Today, Michael wasn't exhausted. He was done. And what these entitled kids, and they're even more, entitled Mother didn't know was that the quiet surgeon they'd been tormenting had spent the last week setting up something that would change everything. Before we dive into how, Michael turned the tables on this nightmare neighbor. If you love stories where entitled people finally face real consequences and justice gets served exactly as it should, smash that like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a decorated trauma surgeon past his breaking point, the confrontation where a desperate parent discovered her children had picked the wrong neighbor to terrorize, and the resolution where entitled behavior met cold, calculated justice. In the first part, you'll witness Michael's descent from patient professional to sleep-deprived strategist. You'll feel every violation as 3 unsupervised children treated his private property like their personal water park, while their mother dismissed his concerns with entitled rage. You'll experience his failed attempts to resolve this peacefully, the escalating damage, and the moment he realized that being reasonable with unreasonable people was pointless. The breaking point came when something irreplaceable was destroyed, and Michael made a decision that would expose just how far entitled behavior had gone. In the second part, the trap springs shut. Michael, armed with evidence and exhausted patience, catches them red-handed one final time. But this confrontation isn't what anyone expected. The mother arrives, full of righteous indignation and threats, completely unaware that Michael had been documenting everything. When he reveals exactly what he knows about her family, her finances, and her vulnerabilities, the power dynamic shifts so completely that her entitled fury crumbles into desperate negotiation. The ultimatum he presents leaves her with 2 choices, neither of them pleasant. In the final part, justice unfolds with surgical precision. The punishment Michael designed hits exactly where it hurts most, and unexpected complications make everything even more satisfying. When the dust settles, 3 kids learn a lesson their mother never bothered teaching them. A community discovers the truth about their entitled neighbor, and Michael finally reclaims the peace he'd paid for. The resolution proves that sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't loud or violent. It's simply refusing to be a victim anymore. Here's exactly how it happened. Michael Torres had bought the house in Riverside Oaks specifically for that pool. After 15 years of night shifts, trauma cases, and saving lives in Jacksonville Memorial's ER, he'd wanted one thing: a private backyard where he could decompress without human contact. The heated saltwater pool with privacy fencing had cost him $43,000. It was his sanctuary. He was meticulous about maintenance, obsessive about chlorine levels, careful about who he allowed in his space. Colleagues described him as brilliant but reserved, the kind of surgeon who could repair a shattered femur while remaining emotionally steady, but who needed solitude to recharge. He lived alone, worked irregular shifts, and asked nothing from his neighbors except basic respect for boundaries. That respect lasted exactly 6 weeks after the Hendersons moved in next door. The first incident happened on a Saturday in mid-June. Michael had just returned from a double shift, eyes burning with fatigue, and found 3 kids in his pool. 2 boys and a girl, none older than middle school, splashing and diving like they owned the place. His 6-foot privacy fence showed fresh scuff marks where they'd climbed over. Michael, still in his scrubs, walked to the edge of his pool and cleared his throat. The kids froze. The oldest boy, maybe 13, stared at him with more annoyance than embarrassment. Michael kept his voice calm. "This is private property. You need to leave." The girl around 11 rolled her eyes. "It's just a pool. You weren't even using it." They climbed out slowly, making a show of their inconvenience, leaving wet footprints across his deck and a half-empty bag of chips floating in the water. Michael assumed it was a one-time thing, kids being thoughtless, easily corrected. He was wrong. 2 weeks later, it happened again. Michael woke at 4 p.m. after a night shift to find the same 3 kids in his pool, plus 2 friends. 5 children, none with permission, treating his property like a community center. This time they'd brought pool toys. Inflatable rafts bobbed in his water. Someone had moved his deck furniture. When he confronted them, the oldest boy smirked. "Our mom said it's fine." "You're never home anyway." Michael's jaw tightened. "Your mom doesn't own my pool. Get out, now!" They left, but slower this time, laughing as they scaled his fence. One of them shouted back, "Relax, dude. It's not that serious." Michael stood there, fury building beneath his surgical calm, and made a decision. He walked next door and knocked. The woman who answered was exactly what Michael expected. Stephanie Henderson, 38, blonde highlights and yoga pants, holding a wine glass at 4:30 p.m. When Michael explained the situation, her expression shifted from fake sweetness to entitled outrage in seconds. "Are you seriously complaining about children swimming?" "On a hot day?" Michael kept his composure. "I'm asking you to teach your children not to trespass. This is the second time." Stephanie's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you weren't so antisocial, you'd understand that neighborhoods are about community." "My kids aren't hurting anything." Michael felt his exhaustion mixing with disbelief. "They're trespassing." "It's illegal." She laughed, actually laughed. "Call the cops then. See if they care about some lonely doctor complaining about kids having fun." She closed the door in his face. Michael stood there, humiliated and furious, and walked back home. He didn't call the cops. Not yet. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Michael had mentioned the situation to exactly one person, his late wife's sister Maria, who'd given him a memorial wind chime the previous year. It was handcrafted copper, engraved with Elena's favorite quote, and hung near his pool where he could hear it during his evening swims. He'd been married to Elena for 8 years before cancer took her. The chime was one of 3 things he had left. On July 14th, Michael came home to find the chime smashed on his deck, the copper pieces bent and scattered. The kids were in his pool, oblivious. When he confronted them, the oldest boy shrugged. "It fell, not our fault." Michael saw red. The boy was lying. The chime had been ripped from its hook. Something inside Michael, the part that had stayed professional through countless traumas, finally cracked. He didn't yell. He simply said very quietly, "Get out of my pool, and don't come back." As they left, he heard one of them mutter, "Crazy old guy." Michael looked at the broken copper in his hands and made a decision. If they wanted to play games, he would show them what games really looked like. If the police wouldn't help and their mother wouldn't parent, Michael would handle this himself. He spent the next week preparing, and on Monday, July 22nd, everything was finally ready. At 2:43 p.m., Michael's phone pinged with the motion alert. He was parked in his driveway, waiting. The newly installed security cameras captured everything in crystal clear 4K, 3 figures vaulting his fence. The Henderson kids, right on schedule. Michael gave them 15 minutes. Let them get comfortable. Let them feel safe. Then he stepped into his backyard, his phone already recording. The splashing stopped instantly. 3 faces turned toward him, caught. The oldest boy, Logan Henderson, tried his usual smirk. "Oh, hey. We were just—" Michael cut him off. "You were just trespassing. Again. On camera this time." He held up his phone. Logan's smirk faltered. "It's not. Our mom said—" Michael's voice stayed surgical calm. "Your mom doesn't own my property, Logan. Neither do you, Aiden, or you, Emma." The younger two exchanged nervous glances. Michael continued. "Get out of my pool. Do not move from my deck. And wait there while I call your mother. We're going to settle this today." The kids climbed out slowly, their earlier confidence evaporating. Michael dialed Stephanie's number, which he'd saved specifically for this moment. She answered on the third ring, irritated. "What?" Michael kept his tone professional. "This is Michael Torres. Your children are in my pool again. I have them on my deck. You need to come get them immediately." There was a pause. Then, "Are you kidding me right now? You called me for this?" Michael's grip tightened on his phone. "I'm giving you two options. Come get them now, or I call the police for trespassing and property damage. Your choice." She hung up. 3 minutes later, Stephanie stormed across his lawn in flip-flops, her face already twisted with entitled fury. "How dare you threaten my children?" she started, voice rising. Michael held up his hand. "Stop. We're doing this differently today." Something in his tone made her pause. Michael turned his phone screen toward her, showing the security footage. "I have 17 instances of your children trespassing on my property over the last 6 weeks. All time-stamped. All documented. I have footage of them destroying property, including a $200 memorial wind chime. I have your voice on recording from our previous conversation, acknowledging the situation and refusing to address it. And I have legal documentation from my attorney ready to file." Stephanie's face went pale. "You're bluffing." Michael pulled out a folder. "I'm a trauma surgeon at Jacksonville Memorial." "Do you know what that means, Stephanie?" She stared at him, thrown by the shift. "It means I document everything. It's what keeps me from getting sued. So let me show you what I've documented." Michael opened the folder. Logan Henderson, 13, student at Riverside Middle School. Aiden Henderson, 11, same school. Emma Henderson, 9, Oakwood Elementary. Your husband, Derek Henderson, works for Coastal Insurance Group. You're a stay-at-home mother with a lifestyle blog about modern parenting. You moved here 8 weeks ago from Atlanta. You're renting this house through Sunshine Property Management with a 1-year lease. And based on public records, your previous landlord filed an eviction notice for property damage. Stephanie's confident mask crumbled completely. "How do you can't—" Michael continued, relentless. "I know all of this because I spent 1 week doing basic research. Public records. Social media, your own blog. You post everything, Stephanie, including complaints about uptight neighbors that I can directly link to this situation." He pulled out printed screenshots. Her own words, mocking him, describing his pool, posted 3 days ago. Her face went from pale to red. "I also spoke with your landlord," Michael continued. "Interesting person. Very concerned about potential property damage complaints from neighbors. Apparently, lease violations are grounds for immediate termination." Stephanie's hands started shaking. "You wouldn't." Michael's expression stayed completely neutral. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 options. Option 1, I file trespassing charges against your children. All 17 documented instances. I file a civil suit for property damage, specifically the destroyed wind chime plus chlorine contamination requiring full pool drainage. I contact your landlord with formal complaints. I share the security footage with Riverside Middle School's administration, since bullying and property destruction violate their code of conduct. And I post a measured, factual account on the neighborhood Facebook group with evidence. Your blog about modern parenting becomes very interesting reading when people see how your children actually behave." Stephanie tried to interrupt. "You can't," Michael kept going. "Option 2, your children repair every bit of damage. They will professionally clean my pool deck, pay for chlorine replacement costs, and replace my wind chime. The total cost is $843. They have 48 hours. I will inspect their work. If it's acceptable, this ends here. If they refuse, miss the deadline, or do substandard work, we proceed to option 1. Immediately. He pulled out a written contract. You're going to sign this agreement. It states you acknowledge their trespassing, accept responsibility, and agree to these terms. If you don't sign, I make the calls to police and your landlord right now while we're standing here. The silence stretched. Logan stared at the ground. Aiden looked like he might cry. Emma already was. Stephanie's entitled fury had collapsed into desperate calculation. This is insane! They're just kids. Michael's voice dropped even lower. They're your kids. You had 6 weeks to teach them respect. You chose not to. You laughed in my face. You encouraged this. And now there are consequences. He held out a pen. Sign or I start making calls. Her hand trembled as she took the pen. She read the contract twice, looking for escape routes, finding none. Then she signed. Michael took it back, photographed it, and emailed it to himself. 48 hours starts now. 2:43 p.m., Wednesday, July 24th. I'll be here waiting. Stephanie grabbed her kid's arms. Let's go. Now! As they climbed back over the fence, Michael heard Logan whisper, Mom, I'm sorry. Stephanie hissed back, Shut up! Just shut up. Michael watched them leave, then smiled for the first time in weeks. He'd learned something in 15 years of trauma surgery. Sometimes the scalpel is kinder than letting infection spread. Wednesday morning arrived humid and brutal, the kind of Florida heat that made asphalt shimmer. At 7:30 a.m., Michael heard his doorbell. 3 exhausted kids stood on his porch with cleaning supplies, their mother's car idling at the curb. Michael didn't invite them in. He simply walked them to the backyard and pointed at the pool deck. Start there. I want every inch scrubbed. Then you're cleaning the pool walls. I'll inspect at noon. For the next 4 hours, Michael worked from his home office while occasionally checking his security cameras. Logan, Aiden, and Emma scrubbed in silence, their earlier arrogance completely gone. The Florida sun beat down mercilessly. They'd brought in adequate supplies. Emma kept crying. Aiden looked like he might vomit from heat exhaustion. Michael brought out water bottles at 10 a.m. without comment. At noon, he inspected their work and found problems immediately. This section here has soap residue. Redo it. The pool walls have a waterline ring you missed. Clean it again. Logan's face flushed. We've been working for hours. Michael cut him off. And you trespassed for weeks. Keep working. At 1:15 p.m., a silver Lexus pulled into Michael's driveway. A man in business casual stepped out, looking confused and angry. Derek Henderson. Michael had been expecting this. Derek walked into the backyard without knocking, saw his children working, and his face went purple. What the hell is this? Stephanie said you were making them clean, but I thought... Michael turned calmly. Your children trespassed on my property 17 times. They destroyed irreplaceable personal property. Their mother signed a contract agreeing to these terms rather than face criminal charges and eviction. Would you like to see the documentation? Derek's anger wavered. 17 times? Stephanie said it was once or twice. Michael pulled out his phone and showed the footage. All of it. Derek watched his children vault the fence, trash the pool, destroy the wind chime, laugh about it. His expression shifted from anger to horror to humiliation. I didn't know. I worked 60-hour weeks. Stephanie said you were just being difficult. Michael's voice stayed. Derek looked at his children, then at Michael. What's the total damage? Michael told him. Derek pulled out his wallet without argument and handed over $900. Keep the extra for your trouble. And I'm sorry, genuinely, this is... He couldn't finish. Michael took the money. They have until 3 p.m. to finish properly. Then this ends. But Derek? The man looked up. Your lease has 6 months left. I suggest you use that time to teach your children that actions have consequences. Because the next neighbor might not offer a second option. Derek nodded, looking broken. He didn't defend his wife. He just helped his children finish the work. At 2:50 p.m., Michael inspected everything one final time. The deck gleamed. The pool was immaculate. 3 exhausted kids stood in a line, sunburned and silent. Michael looked at each of them. "Do you understand why you're here?" Emma nodded, crying. Aiden whispered, "We're sorry." Logan, the oldest, met Michael's eyes. "I destroyed your wind chime. I lied about it. I'm really sorry." It was the first genuine thing Michael had heard from any of them. Michael took a breath. "You made my life hell for 6 weeks. You laughed when I asked you to stop. You treated my grief like a joke and my property like it didn't matter. Your mother taught you that entitled behavior has no consequences. I'm teaching you differently." He paused. "Here's what happens now. You never come near my property again. You see me in the neighborhood, you cross the street. You tell your friends what happened here so they don't make the same mistake. And maybe, eventually, you'll understand that other people's boundaries matter." Derek ushered them out. Stephanie never came to the door. 2 weeks later, Michael saw her loading boxes into a moving truck. Apparently, Derek had filed for divorce. Michael learned this from Maria, who'd heard it from another neighbor. The entitled mom had been posting complaints on her blog about her abusive ex-husband until someone sent Derek the posts. That was the final straw. 8 weeks after that Wednesday, Michael sat by his pool on a cool October evening. The water was perfectly still. His new wind chime, a replacement Maria had helped him find, sang softly in the breeze. A colleague had asked him that week if he felt bad about how everything had unfolded. Michael had thought about it honestly. 3 kids had learned a hard lesson. A family had imploded, though he suspected that implosion was inevitable. And he'd reclaimed his peace. "No," he'd told his colleague. "I gave them options. They made choices. That's not on me." As he floated in his pool under the stars, Michael realized something. For 15 years, he'd watched people face consequences of their actions in his ER. Car crashes from drunk driving, infections from ignored wounds, trauma from preventable violence. He'd saved who he could, but consequences still came. The Henderson kids had gotten off light. They'd learned respect without permanent damage. That was more mercy than most people got. Michael closed his eyes and let the water hold him. The silence was absolute. No splashing, no laughter, no violation, just peace. He'd learned something those weeks. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a police report. Sometimes it comes from refusing to be a victim, from documenting everything, and from forcing entitled people to face what they've done. And as Michael floated there in his sanctuary, finally reclaimed, he smiled. Because justice, whether served hot or cold, was equally satisfying when it was served right. Across the country in Scottsdale, Arizona, retired Air Force Colonel Patricia Vance was watering her front lawn when her new HOA president marched up with a violation notice. "Your flagpole exceeds regulation height," the man declared smugly. Patricia, who'd spent 26 years in military logistics before becoming a civil rights attorney, smiled slowly. "Interesting. Because the flag code supersedes HOA regulations. Also interesting, I helped write the HOA bylaws you're citing, and you're reading Section 4.2b incorrectly." She pulled out a leather folder. "Tell me, did you review the legal precedent from Texas versus Rancho Brava HOA before writing this violation?" "Because I have the case summary here, and the judge's ruling is fascinating." The president's smugness evaporated.